Well, I'm going to be talking about a paper I'm working on now, and this conference, it's amazing to be presenting it on the last day of the conference after so many incredible academic panels that have completely revised the bibliography of this paper.
I don't think it's on.
Oh, hello? Just gotta eat the mic. This is like poetry jam. All right, so what I'm talking about today is in January of this year, I joined the Critical Code Studies Working Group. It's a critical theory working group based out of USC, and we look at code as text. We annotate code in that group, and the idea is that there is something to be gained if you begin looking at computer code as a textual object, as something that is part of culture in a certain way, as something that has, culture interacting with it in its creation. This year, as part of the working group, I was part of an argument. I presented an argument that some Larp rule sets could be interpreted as code that runs on humans. And I'm very interested in this interpretation as the foundational point for other analyses. And it's something that fits into, I would say philosophy is probably the wiser term in terms of there is not yet the research to thoroughly, I don't want to say back this up. It's cultural theory. It's complicated, but it intersects with so many other disciplines. But looking at cultural theory, Larp studies, critical code studies, and social materialism, there's kind of an intersectional cross-disciplinary analysis going on. And the idea is that Larp rules can be interpreted as code, and also that codic Larp systems make visible the deployment of social power through code. So we can look into Larp, and Larp looks into us. These codic rule sets look into the world at large and give us a new way of thinking about the social mechanics of the greater reality. So in this talk, I'm just going to present what I did and why I think it's important, and that's what's going on. So I don't like the term campaign Larp. I am working on language to describe what it is that I'm looking at. 2 years ago, I had my mind blown coming to the first Olympic Games conference, discovering there are other types of Larp that don't involve holding beanbags and yelling, "I call for the dragon's breath and I hit you," and you just lost 40 body points. So this has been a wonderful, expansive experience. And what is needed, what I presented in my talk at the EduLarp conference, is this concept of authorial versus aggregate Larp, looking at how power is deployed in the imaginary reality of the game and trying to find a way to better codify that. But the Larp I'm looking at for this are the ones in which certain social relations are rendered codic, so I call it aggregate Larp. It's a type of Larp in which players have a lot of autonomy. You don't need a storyteller looking at what you're doing for it to have an effect on the imaginary reality of the world. Instead, you get a character sheet, and like in tabletop games, you are able to interact with other characters codically without supervision. So that's kind of a big defining feature of this type of Larp that I'm looking at. And this type of Larp, it creates a fluency-based power structure in which power rests not in performance, but in rule deployment. And that's kind of a big part of it. And in comparing it to what I call authorial Larp, Larps in which you have a storyteller directing your actions and directing what happens in the imaginary world, I'd say those Larps give you a more cohesive story, whereas this type of Larp gives you autonomy, but you don't necessarily feel like you had a beginning, middle, and end for your character. And looking at this type of Larp as a mode of rendering certain social relations codic, as I have been looking through rule books, I'm seeing a difference between action Larps and drama Larps, in which in action Larps, a majority of what's rendered codic in the game is violence. You've taken violence out of the social sphere, you've offlined it, you've created a coded procedure so that you can stab and murder someone without actually doing it. With a drama LARP, rather, you have like emotion and psyche rendered playable. So you're offlining emotional manipulation, creating coded moves that can make you or allow you to inflict your will upon someone's psyche in this very specific way that gives rise to the game's sociality. So in interpreting LARP's code, I'm looking at critical code studies, looking at the work of Mark Marino, who initiated that discipline, the reading of code, the annotation of code, and I'm also looking at the work of Evan Buswell, who in 2009 declared code, like in trying to pin down what exactly is code linguistically, it's both declarative and imperative. It's simultaneously truth and command. So when you're making a codec statement, you're both making a truth declaration and you're also making a command. In annotating LARP as code, the basic breakdown, encounters get treated as programs, players and staff as programmers, rule books as programming language, and rule structures as platforms. And this was based on the feedback in the working group, trying to pin down what exactly is a codec moment in LARP and how does it correlate to moments of computer coding performance. All right, so I've got a video here to give you the 30-second code sample that was presented to the working group. So the name of this program, and this was how it was presented, is an Alliance Troll Battle, circa 2009. It was authored by the Alliance LARP chapter, written in the programming language of the Alliance LARP rulebook, the requisite hardware being humans, and then for the code snippet.
Click on the icon.
Yes. Fingers crossed.
Microsoft PowerPoint is stopping.
Yeah, that computer does not like to print off the video.
All right, well.
Microsoft PowerPoint is restored.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, I have
Try it one more time.
a rather charming video that freeform LARPers will cringe at. But we'll see if we...
Is this the lightning bolt video, the troll battle thing?
No, but
No?
probably it's just
Okay.
a random set.
I thought that was an Alliance LARP thing
This
that
is
was
something
sourced
you
out
can pull
of.
up somewhere else.
We can try.
Yeah, I didn't like that. And in fact, now I don't know.
If we're not able to view it, are we able to view it on the website?
We could upload it if you do you need it for your analysis.
You know, I think we can move ahead without it.
Okay, that's a shame.
Well, it's on the website, and I guess I can describe it. You know, it's a group of people in the forest shouting all sorts of coded commands at each other. And for folks who are familiar with this type of campaign LARP, it's just a very familiar moment of 30 people shouting, 5 normal while swinging a sword. I call for the dragon's breath. It's just a flood of noise, and everyone's reacting and interacting to the code in these very specific tit-for-tat kind of ways. They're interpreting it immediately as being part of the physical reality that saturation moment has occurred, and it's kind of a one-for-one moment of the social reality having been altered in this interesting way. And so what I did for the working group was I took that video of folks fighting in the forest, and every last thing that happens in the video, I wrote it down. So these were all the moments of codec deployment. There was someone shouting 5 silver, someone else shouts 6 normal, someone else shouts I curse you with weakness while throwing the beanbag. There was a spell shield. And so I went through, and there's like a good 4 pages of this in 30 seconds, like this many codec moments are deployed. But what was interesting was breaking it down and saying, okay, there's this codec effect, and then there's a social effect. This is the back end, this is the front end. In the codec effect, so I summon a force to disarm your shield plus a beanbag hit. uttering this phrase while landing a successful hit with a qualified weapon forces a qualified target to drop their shield and touch it for 5 seconds. So you have this codified interaction, and then you have the social effect, the way that players are interpreting it, the way that the social reality has been altered through this codec exchange. And it starts getting really fun when you're looking at different rule sets that render other things beyond battle codec. But there are a lot of ways to approach this. So Larp rules behaving like code, just really quickly looking at some of the social correlations. You have code standardization as a social practice, both in Larp rule sets and in code. And what's interesting is seeing how there is similar language in the discourse around the standardization of Larp rule sets and the standardization of C programming language, or the standardization of Ruby on Rails. You have different practices around, do we have a benevolent dictator who makes a decision about every last thing that happens in this code, or do you decide by committee, and how is that committee formed? What is the funding structure of that committee, and all of that can affect how the code ultimately is developed and how it plays out. With looking at DBMS, the relational modeling upon which modern code is founded, you see that in Larp rule sets, insofar as you'll have a codec effect. Each underlying thing in the codec effect represents a subsystem of rules that the human machine, that the player, is having to memorize and evoke. So when I hear with Mystic Force, I bind you, I know what it means for someone to properly utter a phrase. There's a rule set around that. I know what it means to land a successful hit. There are parts of the body that are marked for what's successful and what's not. I know what a qualifying beanbag is. There are measurements around that. Each of these features is a subsystem. So as I'm running this code as a human machine, there's something quite interesting happening in the way that I'm modeling relationships between different rule sets. Right. And we also have proprietary code. If anyone's interacted with folks who have statements like this in their rule books, this book is for use in alliance games only. For example, having code that can't be used outside of the game, and that model is also in operation with software as well. Really quickly, so one of the exciting takeaways from building this analysis, and there are so many, is looking at reification. Looking at reification in Larp. If anyone who's been part of these games knows how it feels when you hit that point of saturation, when the rules flip, when a phrase in a beanbag suddenly really stand in for a ball of flame in a way that they didn't during your first game, when your mode of interpretation is just so fluid that while you're in game, there's just a different reality you're suddenly part of. That moment when you gain money feels real in your hand. That's one that a lot of campaign Larpers talk about, like that sense that this money is real. So Larp creates a really interesting moment to look at how reification works in an isolated environment. And it lets us start building a framework to look out, to look towards what does it mean when a piece of paper on a $20 bill stands in for compelling someone else's labor. What does it mean when you think you know what kind of music someone likes because of the color of their skin? Just as in many Larps, if someone's painted green, you know their skill set, supposedly. That moment when a person's gender stands in for a set of predetermined lifelong activities. All of these are moments of reification that occur through repeated social reinforcement. And we can see on a playful, small scale how this process works by looking to Larp. So thank you. I know I'm out of time, but thank you very much.